All right, so we're diving into some pretty deep waters today. You ready for this?
Yeah, bring it on. I love this stuff.
Awesome. So
Hmm.
the book we're tackling, you guys wanted us to dig into this one. It's called The Courage to be Disliked.
By Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitaka Koga.
Right, and it's based on some pretty radical ideas from Adlerian psychology presented as a back-and-forth dialogue.
A Socratic dialogue.
That's right. And the mission here is to unearth some of the big takeaways from this book that can really change the way we think about, happiness, freedom, even how we handle relationships.
It's a different perspective.
Yeah, like we're stepping outside the box
Yeah.
of, constantly focusing on past trauma and needing everyone to like us.
Right?
Because this book really throws down the gauntlet and says, you can be happy, like right now in this moment, by having the courage to be free, even if it means, not everyone's going to be on board with your choices.
And that right there is what makes this book so powerful. It challenges some of our most basic assumptions about why we are the way we are and what we need to find happiness.
Exactly. So let's jump right in, starting with the night one of their conversation, which really flips the script on the idea of trauma.
Okay.
The big idea here is that the past doesn't control our future. It doesn't lock us into a certain destiny. Instead, our actions right now are driven by the goals we're aiming for today.
And that's a huge shift in thinking. Adlerian psychology really emphasizes that we're not just reacting to what's happened to us. Like we have agency. We actively create our own emotions and behaviors to achieve certain things, even if we're not consciously aware of what those things are.
Which is where things get super interesting.
Yeah.
Because they suggest that what we often call trauma can actually act like an excuse.
Yeah, their term.
Yeah, it's like we use it to justify why we are the way we are.
Right, like why we do the things we do.
Exactly. And they use the example of someone who says, I can't trust anyone because I was betrayed in the past.
Mhm.
But from an Adlerian viewpoint, that past betrayal isn't the reason that person is distrustful. Now it's not forcing them to be that way. Instead, they might be actively choosing not to trust as a way to protect themselves from getting hurt again.
Right, to avoid that vulnerability.
Yeah, and it totally reframes this seemingly passive reaction to the past as an active choice being made in the present.
Exactly. And that's really empowering.
It is, right. It puts so much power back in the individual's hands.
Yeah.
And the book goes on to say that change can happen like in an instant, just through a conscious decision.
Like that.
There's this quote that really nails it. People are not driven by past causes, but move toward goals they themselves set.
And this emphasis on future goals, what's called teleology, is a cornerstone of Adlerian thought. It's this optimistic idea that we have the power to steer our own lives instead of just being shaped by our past.
I like that. So basically, we're not just passive products of our history.
We have the ability to choose.
We have agency. Okay, let's shift gears to night 2, which drops this bomb. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems.
That's a big one.
It is. And the book argues that most of our struggles actually stem from how we relate to other people. It's not necessarily the work itself or the lack of money or our social status, but how we interact with those around us that causes the most trouble.
Right. The idea is that our anxieties and frustrations often come from comparing ourselves to others. That need for recognition and those feelings of not being good enough that can pop up in social situations.
It's like that classic example of stress at work. It's not always the workload itself that gets to us, but the worry about what our boss or colleagues will think, the pressure to perform, the constant feeling of being judged.
It's so true.
Right. And even things we do alone can be affected by our awareness of others. Like we might hesitate to try a new hobby because we're worried about what people will say, even though their opinions don't actually affect our ability to do it.
That's a good point.
And this leads to another really interesting idea. Being disliked by someone can actually be a sign of your freedom.
Okay, that one usually raises some eyebrows.
Yeah, they actually say when you are disliked by someone, it is proof that you are living in freedom. But isn't there a difference between, being disliked for your genuine values and being disliked for just being a jerk?
Absolutely. The book isn't encouraging people to be rude or offensive. What's fascinating here is the idea that if you're constantly striving for universal approval, you're actually limiting yourself.
How so?
Well, to please everyone, you often have to suppress parts of yourself, conform to expectations, and avoid voicing dissenting opinions. So being disliked in certain situations could mean you're not afraid to stand up for what you believe in, to live authentically, even if your values clash with others.
That's a really different way of looking at it.
It is, and it challenges our deep-seated need for social acceptance, which From an evolutionary standpoint, makes sense. We're wired to want to fit in.
Right, belonging to the group meant survival.
Exactly. But to consciously choose to face potential dislike, that requires a lot of self-assurance and a sense of psychological safety with yourself.
So night 3 introduces this concept that I think is both practical and freeing. Discard other people's tasks.
Or the separation of tasks, as it's often called.
Right, and it's all about clearly defining what's your responsibility and what belongs to someone else.
This is crucial for healthy relationships and just protecting your own well-being. When we get tangled up in other people's problems and try to control things that aren't ours to control, or when we let others meddle in our own business, it almost always leads to conflict and unhappiness.
Yeah, it's like constantly asking yourself, whose problem is this really?
Exactly.
And the example they give is parents who are constantly stressing about their child's exams.
Oh, yeah.
The book says the child's job is to study and take the exam, and the parent's role is to offer support and encouragement and create a good environment for them to do that, but not to try and control the outcome or take on the child's anxiety as their own.
Right. The parent can offer resources, help them study if the child asks, and be there for them emotionally, but they can't and shouldn't try to force a particular grade.
And the child's reaction to the exam results is ultimately their own to deal with.
Exactly.
And once you really understand and apply this idea of separation of tasks, the feeling of freedom that comes with it is incredible. Yeah, there's a quote that sums it up perfectly. You are not living to satisfy other people's expectations.
It's like a permission slip to focus on your own life and what you're responsible for.
Totally. And I remember this time I got so stressed out trying to manage a friend's work project on top of my own. I was taking on their tasks and neglecting my own stuff.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
It was only when I realized I needed to step back and let them handle their own responsibilities that I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders.
It's amazing how much mental and emotional energy we free up when we stop trying to please everyone or control outcomes that are outside our sphere of influence.
It's true. And it lets us focus on what we can actually influence our own thoughts, actions, and choices.
Exactly. And once we've untangled ourselves from other people's tasks, we free up energy to focus on our own contributions, which brings us to night 4.
Which is all about where the center of the world is. And this is where we get into the idea that real happiness comes from feeling useful to others, from contributing, rather than seeking praise or validation from outside ourselves.
And that's a subtle but super important difference. The book argues that chasing external approval like praise or recognition only gives you a temporary and ultimately unsatisfying kind of happiness.
Right.
Real, lasting fulfillment comes from the intrinsic satisfaction of contributing to the well-being of others and the community around you.
And they use this great contrast between seeking external validation, like, cleaning your apartment meticulously just to post impressive pictures on social media, versus the internal motivation of cleaning, because a tidy space just makes you feel better and creates a more peaceful environment for yourself and anyone you live with.
It's a great example.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in needing recognition at work. But it's true that the days I feel most fulfilled are when I know my efforts genuinely helped someone else, whether or not I got a pat on the back for it.
Exactly. In the first example, you're driven by a need for external approval. In the second, it's coming from an internal sense of contribution, first to yourself and then potentially to others. And the book emphasizes that the real joy is in the act of contributing itself, not in the expectation of a reward or acknowledgement. As they put it, we don't seek recognition, we find joy in contribution.
Finally, night 5 brings us to live in earnest in the here and now. This is about embracing the present moment rather than always striving for some future achievement or recognition.
It's a powerful antidote to our tendency to always be looking ahead, working towards the next goal, and postponing happiness until some point in the future.
Right, like I'll be happy when.
Exactly. And the book encourages us to find meaning and joy in the everyday experiences in the process itself rather than just the outcome.
They use the example of someone who wants to write a book but keeps putting it off because they're afraid of failing or not becoming a bestseller.
Right. They're living for a future potential outcome.
Exactly. But to live in earnest would be to just start writing because you have something you want to express, and finding value and satisfaction in the act of creating itself, regardless of whether it's a commercial success or not.
It's about shifting the focus from the destination to the journey.
I like that.
And it's in this context that the book connects the courage to be happy with the courage to be disliked, because embracing the present and living authentically might mean making choices that others don't understand or agree with.
And this all circles back to what they call the greatest life lie, believing you must be recognized by others to be worthy. It's about breaking free from that deep-seated need for external validation to feel okay about yourself, to feel like you matter.
And that's the heart of it. True self-acceptance and lasting happiness come from within ourselves, not from the approval or recognition of others.
So just to do a quick review of the major Adlerian concepts we've uncovered from the book. First, we have teleology, the idea that our actions are driven by present goals, not just past events.
Right.
Then there's the separation of tasks, focusing on our own responsibilities and respecting the boundaries of others.
Yes.
The concept of horizontal relationships, treating everyone as equals. The importance of contribution to community as a key to genuine happiness. And underpinning all of this, the courage to be disliked, which is essential for true freedom and living authentically.
And these concepts work together to create a really powerful framework for understanding ourselves and how we interact with the world. It emphasizes taking responsibility for our own lives, finding happiness in our choices and contributions, rather than being dictated by the past or other people's expectations.
So as we wrap up our deep dives into this material,
Yeah.
what's the final message of the book that really stands out to you?
I think it's ultimately a message of empowerment and liberation. You are already whole and capable. You don't need to be fixed or perfect, and you absolutely don't need everyone's approval. True happiness and genuine freedom, according to this Adlerian perspective, come from having the courage to choose your own path, to live according to your own values, even when you face misunderstanding, disapproval, or even rejection. That's where the journey to authentic selfhood really begins.
Wow, powerful stuff. So for you listening out there, I want you to think about this. Consider one specific area of your life right now where the fear of being disliked might be subtly influencing your decisions or holding you back from pursuing something you really want or believe in. What small, concrete step, even a tiny one, could you take today if that fear simply didn't exist?
That's a great question.
It's worth reflecting on how these ideas from the courage to be disliked might offer a new perspective and maybe unlock a little more freedom and a deeper sense of happiness in your own life starting right now.
I think so.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring
Keep questioning.
and keep diving deep.
See you next time.
Like and subscribe.